When my dad was 8 years old, he learned that he loved rocks, finding and collecting and cutting and polishing rocks. A rockhound neighbor of his, Professor Ade, took him under his wing and taught him everything he knew.
People that know you really well would probably agree that your interest and your enthusiasm for rock collecting goes beyond passion to the point of crazy over the top.
No doubt about it.
What's the difference between rock collecting now as an adult versus how you got started as a kid?
As a kid, I went over to Professor Ade's house, and we would cut and polish rock in his shop and make displays for rock shows, and we cataloged his collection. Today, I go out and I find the rock, then I dig it, and then I bring it home, and I cut it, and I take the very best. I get excited all over again with the cutting, and I take the very best, put it in my collection. Then I sell what remains.
You've had a lot of adventures over the years. Can you share one with me?
One that comes to mind is the Sonora plume beds in Mexico. I was prospecting a mile and a half or so downriver from camp, and out of nowhere came a helicopter, dropped down into a corral right below me, about 500 feet below me. And so I could tell it looked like drugs, but as soon as it landed, three men came out carrying bundles and loaded the helicopter. I looked for a place to hide, ended up in a crevice, and pinned myself to the rock. They could still see me, partly, but it took off. It revved up the engine about 8 minutes afterwards, and I thought, well, this is it. They've seen me. Life is cheap here. So fortunately, they took off and went downriver. And so I went back and I talked to my rockhound friend, and he asked me what had happened. I told him, and we decided to leave the next morning. Well, early the next morning, two men rode up on horseback, dressed like city slickers, not cowboys, and they asked, well, have you seen our horses? And up on the mountain, I said, no, we didn't see any horses up there. And they said, well, what are you doing here? And I said, we're collecting agate. And they said, could we see some? And I said, yes. And I showed them some. And they said, well, if you see our horses, let me know. And they rode off in the sunset. And I never went back.
Can you briefly tell me maybe how you collect, how it's changed over time?
What I do is I go to an area and I look for chips, and from old rockhounds that would chip an agate as they went through and take the rock with them, but the chips were still there. And so I look at those chips and find the concentrations. I dig down. Then I start digging uphill, maybe a foot or 2 feet deep, down to the hard layer. And I take these rocks and put them in a pile, and then I high grade them at the end of the dig. And that's what I do today. The idea to write a book came from a rockhound friend about 6 years ago. He said, Pat, you have so many beautiful agates, you need to share them with the world.